Commandant Vexthor stood on the raised platform overlooking the assembly ground. Below him, 300 recruits from 17 different species stood at attention. The volcanic moon of Kreshmar burned hot beneath their feet, and the twin suns cast harsh shadows across the black stone courtyard. This was the forge, and Vexthor had commanded it for 20 years. "Look around you," Vexthor began, his voice amplified across the grounds. His 4 eyes scanned the crowd with cold precision. 300 recruits stand here today. In 6 months, only 9 of you will graduate. 3%. The rest will quit, wash out, or be carried out on medical transports. The recruits shifted nervously. Some of the larger species, the towering Krynoc with their thick armor plating and the razor-clawed Silith hunters, stood confident. Others, smaller and less physically imposing, already showed fear in their eyes. "You are here because your governments believe you have potential," Vexthor continued. "They are wrong about most of you. Potential means nothing. Only results matter. Only strength matters. In combat, there is no second place. There is victory or death. This academy will teach you which one you deserve." Vexthor had given this speech 200 times before. He knew it by heart. He knew which words made recruits stand taller, and which ones made them doubt themselves. He crafted each sentence like a blade, designed to cut away weakness before it could spread. "You will receive no mercy here," he said. "You will find no compassion. These things get soldiers killed. I lost my entire unit in the Borderlands War because we hesitated. Because we showed weakness. I will not allow that to happen to any soldier who graduates from my academy." The memory flashed through his mind as it did every day. His unit, pinned down in the ruins of a settlement. Civilians approaching with their hands raised. His second in command, ordering them to hold fire. The explosion, the screams, 23 soldiers dead because they believed mercy had a place on the battlefield. Vexthor pushed the memory away. He had built his entire philosophy on that moment. Emotion was a liability. Compassion was death. Only the strong survived, and strength meant being hard, cold, and utterly without hesitation. As he continued his speech, his eyes moved across the crowd. Most recruits stared straight ahead as military protocol demanded. But one human near the back caught his attention. The human stood relaxed, not rigid. His eyes moved slowly across the other recruits, studying them rather than focusing on Vexthor. Humans, the newest species to join the Galactic Coalition. Vexthor had read the reports. They came from a death world called Earth where everything seemed designed to kill them. Extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that evolved faster than medicine could counter them. The humans had survived all of it and somehow developed space travel in the process. But looking at this particular human, Vex's Thor saw nothing impressive. He stood average height compared to other species, with no natural armor, no claws, no enhanced strength. His name tag read, Matthews, R. Just another recruit who would probably wash out in the first week. "Your first trial begins at dawn," Vexthor announced. "The Gauntlet of Knives. 12 hours through the volcanic valleys carrying 70 pounds of equipment. No food. No rest. My instructors will be testing you every step of the way. This is your first chance to prove you belong here." He paused for effect, letting the weight of the challenge sink in. "Any questions?" Silence. "Good." Fear kept recruits focused. Then, the human raised his hand. Vexthor felt a flash of irritation. Recruits were not supposed to speak during the opening assembly, but he nodded curtly. "Speak, sir," the human said clearly. "Are we permitted to help each other during the trial?" The question hung in the air. Several recruits turned slightly to look at the human. Vexthor felt his irritation grow into anger. "No," he said sharply. "Each recruit will complete the trial alone. Soldiers who depend on others become liabilities. You must prove your individual strength. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," the human replied without emotion. But something about the question bothered Vexthor. In 20 years, no recruit had ever asked about helping others. They asked about equipment specifications, about route details, about injury protocols. They never asked about cooperation. It violated the fundamental principle of the academy. He dismissed the assembly and watched the recruits file out to their barracks. The human, Matthews, walked alongside a nervous-looking Thelian. Speaking quietly to the smaller alien, the Thelian's posture relaxed slightly as they talked. Vexthor turned to his second-in-command, a veteran Kaldrith instructor named Sorrel. "That human, Matthews. Watch him closely during the trial. You think he will cause problems, Commandant?" "I think he does not understand what strength means," Vexthor replied. "He will learn tomorrow, or he will fail." That night, Vexthor reviewed the personnel files of all 300 recruits, as he always did. He memorized their species, their physical capabilities, their psychological profiles. He looked for weaknesses he could exploit during training. Breaking recruits down was the only way to rebuild them into proper soldiers. Matthews, Ryan, age 24, former emergency medical technician from Earth, no prior military experience. Psychological evaluation noted high empathy scores and strong cooperative tendencies. Physical assessment rated him as average for human standards, which meant below average compared to most coalition species. Vexthor closed the file with disdain. High empathy. Cooperative tendencies. These were not the traits of elite soldiers. This human would wash out quickly. Probably during the gauntlet itself. The volcanic heat alone would break him. But as Vexthor prepared for sleep that night, he found his thoughts returning to that question. Are we permitted to help each other? Such a simple question. Such a wrong question. Soldiers needed to be independent, self-reliant, capable of operating alone. That was how you survived when everything went wrong. Vexthor had survived the Borderlands massacre because he had been on a solo reconnaissance mission when the ambush happened. He had been alone. He had been strong enough to endure. That was the lesson he carried. The truth he built his academy upon. Dawn came quickly on Kreshmar. The recruits assembled at the starting point of the gauntlet, each fitted with their equipment pack and basic supplies. Vexthor addressed them one final time before the trial began. 70 pounds, 12 hours, 140 kilometers. The strong will finish, the weak will quit. Begin. The recruits scattered, each choosing their own path through the valleys. The Krynok charged forward with brute force. The Silith moved with predatory grace. The smaller species struggled immediately with the weight and heat. Vexthor boarded his command transport and lifted into the air. Multiple drones tracked every recruit, feeding information back to him and his staff. He watched the screens with practiced eyes, noting who moved efficiently and who wasted energy. Matthews appeared on one of the screens. The human had settled into a steady pace, not rushing but not lagging behind either. Unremarkable. Exactly as Vexthor had predicted, the trial continued. Hour 1 passed without incident. Hour 2 brought the first casualty. A Venlith recruit named Kess collapsed near a thermal vent, overcome by heat exhaustion. The drones marked his location. Medical teams would retrieve him after the trial ended. It was harsh, but it taught recruits to know their limits and manage their resources. On the screen, Vexthor watched other recruits pass by the fallen Kess. Some glanced down briefly. Most did not look at all. They understood the rules. Then Matthews appeared on that same screen. The human approached Kess, slowed, and stopped completely. Vexthor leaned forward, watching intently. Matthews knelt beside Kess and began checking the Venlith's vital signs with quick, practiced movements. He pulled supplies from his pack and started treating the heat exhaustion. He stopped, Sorrel said with surprise. He is helping. Vexthor felt cold fury building in his chest. This human was not just failing, he was actively defying the trial's purpose. He was choosing compassion over strength, cooperation over individual achievement. I am going down there, Vexthor said. His transport descended rapidly and landed directly in front of Matthews. Vexthor emerged, his full 2-meter height towering over the kneeling human. Recruit Matthews, he said, his voice cold as space. Explain yourself. The human looked up, his hands still working on Kess. This recruit will die without immediate medical intervention. Sir. His species has a unique cardiovascular response to extreme heat. He needs treatment now. You were ordered to complete the trial, Vexthor said. You have stopped. You have failed. Matthews met his eyes without flinching. The mission parameters never stated we could not render medical aid, sir. And leaving a soldier to die when you have the ability and knowledge to save him is not strength. It is cowardice, dressed as discipline. The words hit Vex's Thor like a physical blow. No recruit had ever spoken to him this way. No one had ever challenged his authority. His methods. His fundamental beliefs. Vexthor returned to monitoring the trial, but his focus had shifted. Most of his attention now fixed on the other recruits, watching for any sign that Matthews's defiance had spread like an infection through the group. For the next hour, everything proceeded normally. The Krynoc warriors pushed through obstacles with raw power. The Silith hunters navigated the difficult terrain with natural grace. The weaker recruits struggled but continued forward, driven by fear of failure or hope of success. Then Vexthor noticed something strange. Two recruits, a Krynoc named Yara and a smaller Thelian scout called Pip, had stopped near a narrow canyon crossing. The canyon was not particularly dangerous, but it required careful navigation. Pip was clearly exhausted, moving slowly, and making mistakes that cost time. Yara should have passed easily and left the Thelian behind. Instead, the large warrior waited, then spoke to Pip. Vexthor activated the audio feed. The crossing is safer on the left side, Yara was saying. The rocks are more stable there. Take your time. Pip nodded gratefully and followed the advice. Both recruits crossed together, with Yara occasionally pointing out good handholds. Vexthor felt his jaw tighten. This cooperation was spreading. He checked other feeds. A Silith hunter named Dren was sharing water with a dehydrated recruit from a desert species. Two human recruits were coordinating to help a third over a steep incline. Everywhere he looked, small acts of assistance were occurring. Commandant, Sorrel said carefully. The cooperation is widespread. Should we intervene? Vexthor considered. He could order his instructors to separate the recruits, to penalize anyone who helped others, but that would require stopping the trial entirely and admitting that his control had slipped. No, he said finally. Let them continue. They will learn that cooperation costs them time and energy. The trial will punish them naturally. But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. The recruits who cooperated were not falling behind. In fact, they were maintaining better pace than those who worked alone. The isolated recruits made mistakes from exhaustion and stress. The cooperating groups compensated for individual weaknesses, sharing knowledge about terrain and hazards. By hour 8, the trial results were becoming clear. Of the top 20 recruits approaching the finish line, 15 were part of cooperative groups, only 5 were lone individuals, and all 5 were from species with exceptional physical endurance. Vexthor reviewed the communication logs, searching for an explanation. What he found disturbed him deeply. During the first hour of the trial, before the start line, Matthews had moved through the assembled recruits. The audio was clear. He had not been discussing the trial or offering advice on the course. Instead, he had been introducing himself. I am Ryan. The recording captured him saying to a nervous Thelian. Where are you from? Thelia 7, the northern continent. The alien replied hesitantly. That is interesting. I read that your people have incredible night vision. Is that true? Yes, we evolved to hunt in darkness. That is impressive. I am terrible in the dark. Back on Earth, I got lost camping once and walked in circles for 3 hours. The Thelian had laughed. The tension in the alien's body language had visibly relaxed. Vexthor watched recording after recording of similar conversations. Matthews asking about homeworlds, about families, about hobbies and interests. Making jokes about his own limitations, asking questions that made others talk about their strengths. In 1 hour, This human had done something Vex Thor had never attempted in 20 years of running the academy. He made the recruits see each other as individuals rather than competitors, as people rather than obstacles. And when Kess had collapsed, those people had remembered they were part of something larger than themselves. Vex Thor closed the recordings and sat in silence. The trial was ending. Recruits were crossing the finish line. By all metrics, the trial should have been a disaster. Cooperation should have slowed everyone down, created dependencies, bred weakness. Instead, the completion rate was the highest Vex Thor had seen in 5 years. Only 12 recruits had failed to finish. Usually, the number was closer to 40. "What are your orders, Commandant?" Sorrel asked. Vex Thor stood slowly. "Summon Matthews to my office immediately. And bring me the complete psychological profile on humans. All of it." 20 minutes later, Matthews stood at attention in front of Vex Thor's desk. The human looked tired but composed. His uniform was dusty from the long walk back to base, but his posture remained military correct. Vex Thor studied him in silence for a long moment. This unremarkable human from a species barely known to the Coalition. This recruit who should have been easy to break or dismiss. Somehow, he had challenged the fundamental structure of the Forge in less than a day. "Do you understand what you did today?" Vex Thor asked finally. "I provided medical assistance to a fellow recruit, sir," Matthews replied. "You defied a direct order." "I respectfully disagree, sir. Your order was to complete the trial. It did not explicitly forbid rendering aid. Do not play word games with me, recruit," Vex Thor said sharply. "You knew the intent. Individual achievement. Personal strength. These are the principles of this academy." "Yes, sir. I understood the intent," Matthews said. "I simply believe the intent is wrong." The directness of the statement caught Vex Thor off guard. Recruits did not tell commandants they were wrong. It simply did not happen. "Explain yourself," Vex Thor ordered, his voice dangerous. Matthews took a breath. "Sir, with respect, this academy produces excellent individual soldiers. Your graduates are skilled, tough, and capable of operating independently. That is valuable. But," Vex Thor prompted, "but war is not fought by individuals, sir. It is fought by units, by teams, by soldiers who trust each other enough to risk themselves for the mission and for each other." Vex Thor stood abruptly, his chair scraping backward. "Trust makes soldiers hesitate. Attachment makes them emotional. Emotion gets people killed. I learned this lesson in the borderlands. Recruit, I learned it in blood." "I know your history, sir," Matthews said quietly. "I read about the Borderlands massacre in the Academy archives, and I am sorry for your loss. But with respect, your unit did not die because they showed compassion. They hesitated because they believed civilians were innocent," Vex Thor said coldly. "That hesitation killed them." "No, sir," Matthews said, and his voice carried absolute certainty. "They died because intelligence failed to identify a trap. They died because command sent them into an ambush without proper reconnaissance. They died because someone made a tactical error. Compassion did not kill your unit. A failure of information and preparation killed them." The words hung in the air. Vex Thor felt something crack inside his chest. Something he had kept frozen for 20 years. "You know nothing about war," he said. But the words lacked conviction. "I know human history, sir," Matthews replied. "We have fought wars for our entire existence. Thousands of years of conflict. And we learned something that I think the Coalition has forgotten." "And what is that?" Vex Thor asked. "The strongest military units in human history were not the ones with the best individual soldiers. They were the units where soldiers fought for each other, where they would run into fire not for medals or honor, but because their brother or sister was in danger. We call it esprit de corps. Unit cohesion. It makes soldiers not just willing to die for a cause, but desperate to live for each other." Vex Thor sat back down slowly. "Such bonds create vulnerabilities. They create strength, sir," Matthews said. "A soldier fighting alone has only his own motivation to keep him going. A soldier fighting for his team has something bigger than himself. That is why human military units that train together and bond together have higher performance ratings, better mission success rates, and lower psychological trauma than units of individual specialists. You are describing weakness disguised as strength, Vexthor said. But he heard the doubt in his own voice. Matthews stepped forward slightly. Sir, may I ask you a question? Vexthor nodded curtly. How many of your graduates re-enlist after their first term of service? The question struck like a blade. Vexthor knew the answer immediately. Less than 20%. He had always assumed it was because coalition military service was demanding, and his graduates had proven themselves enough to move to civilian careers. But now, hearing the question asked aloud, he wondered if there was another explanation. Why does that matter? He asked. Because it suggests that your methods produce soldiers who are capable but not fulfilled. They serve their obligation and leave. They do not stay because they have no bonds, no unit loyalty, no reason to continue beyond duty. Vexthor stood again and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds. Below, recruits were returning from the trial, exhausted but talking to each other, helping those who were limping, sharing water and ration packs. What would you have me do? He asked quietly. Abandon 20 years of proven methods because one human recruit thinks he knows better? I would have you test it, sir, Matthews said. Give me a chance to prove my philosophy works. Vexthor turned to face him. How? Assign me to lead a squad, Matthews said. Give me the recruits who are performing worst, the ones most likely to wash out. If I can get them through the next major trial using cooperative methods, then you reconsider your approach. If I fail, I accept expulsion and publicly state that you were right. Vexthor studied the human's face. There was no arrogance there, no smugness, just conviction and a strange kind of hope. It was a foolish proposal. The worst recruits were weak for a reason. No amount of teamwork could overcome fundamental physical or mental limitations. Matthews would fail, his methods would be discredited, and the academy would continue as it always had. But something in Vexthor wanted to see it. Wanted to know if this human certainty came from truth or naivety. Very well, Vexthor said. You will have your chance. I will assign you a squad of the lowest performing recruits. You will prepare them for the siege of Broken Spire in 2 weeks. If your squad completes the siege successfully, I will consider restructuring the academy's training methods. If you fail, you will be expelled immediately. Agreed? Agreed? Sir, Matthews said without hesitation. Dismissed, Vexthor ordered. Vexthor assigned Matthews a squad of 6 recruits the following morning. Each one represented a failure in the making by every standard measure the academy used. Kira was a Thelian female, physically weak even by her species standards. She struggled with the weight of standard equipment and fatigued quickly during physical trials. Her file noted insufficient combat capability in red text. Dren was a Silith male who should have excelled. His species were natural hunters with enhanced reflexes and strength. But Dren suffered from severe panic attacks during high-stress situations. He had frozen during 3 separate combat simulations. Yara was a Krynok female, powerful and capable, but her file contained a disturbing note. Exiled from clan for showing excessive mercy to enemies. Among the Krynok, mercy was considered a genetic defect. The others were similar. Pip, a male Thelian with poor spatial awareness. Zena, a female Venlith who had recovered from the heat exhaustion incident, but remained physically fragile. And lastly, Marcus Chen, a human male who suffered from severe self-doubt and froze under direct authority. Vexthor watched through security feeds as Matthews met his squad for the first time. The 6 recruits stood in a training room, looking defeated before they even began. They knew what this assignment meant. They were the failures, grouped together so their inevitable washout would be efficient. Matthews entered the room and immediately did something Vexthor did not expect. He smiled. "Hello everyone," Matthews said warmly. "I am Ryan. I know you have all been assigned to this squad because Command thinks you are going to fail. I want you to know something important right now. They are wrong." The recruits looked at him with confusion and suspicion. I have read all your files, Matthews continued. Every single one of you has something valuable. Something the Academy has not recognized because they are only looking for one type of strength. We are going to find your strengths and build on them. I cannot carry the equipment weight, Kira said quietly, her voice defeated. I have tried. I am too weak. You are not weak, Matthews said firmly. You are small. Those are different things. Your file says you scored the highest marks in tactical planning and threat assessment. That is not weakness, Kira. That is intelligence. And intelligence wins wars more than muscle does. Kira looked up, surprise evident in her large eyes. Matthews turned to Dren. You have panic attacks during combat stress. Your file treats this like a defect. But I see someone who has the self-awareness to recognize when their body is in distress. That is valuable. We just need to give you tools to manage it. He moved around the room, addressing each recruit individually, finding something positive in what the Academy had marked as failure. Vex Thor watched, his expression unreadable. This is manipulation, Sorrel said from beside him. He is giving them false hope. Perhaps, Vex Thor replied. Or perhaps he sees something we do not. For the next 3 days, Matthews trained his squad in ways that violated every protocol the Academy had. Instead of drilling them on weapons proficiency and combat techniques, he spent hours just talking with them, learning about their backgrounds, their fears, their dreams. Vex Thor watched as Matthews sat with Dren and taught him breathing exercises used by human emergency responders. Simple techniques to control panic responses, nothing sophisticated, nothing that appeared in standard military training. He watched Matthews work with Kira. Not on physical conditioning, but on memorizing every detail of the broken spire fortress they would need to assault. The tiny Thelian absorbed information like a computer, creating tactical maps in her mind. He watched Matthews organize team exercises that looked more like games than training. Trust falls. Coordination challenges. Activities where they had to rely on each other completely. On the 4th day, Vex Thor could no longer contain his frustration. He went down to the training room personally and interrupted a session where the squad was simply sitting in a circle, talking. What is this? Vex Thor demanded. The siege trial is in 10 days, and you are having a conversation? Matthews stood calmly. We are building trust, sir. Trust does not capture fortresses, Vex Thor snapped. Combat skills do. Tactical ability does. Physical conditioning does. With respect, sir, all of those things require trust to be effective, Matthews replied. Dren cannot overcome his panic attacks if he does not trust that his team will support him when he freezes. Marcus cannot follow orders if he does not trust that I will not humiliate him for mistakes. They need to know each other first. You are wasting time, Vex Thor said. Time they do not have. Matthews met his eyes steadily. I am investing time in the foundation. A fortress built on weak ground collapses. A team built without trust fails. Vex Thor wanted to order him to stop, to force proper military drilling. But their agreement held him back. He had given Matthews 2 weeks. He would allow the human to fail on his own terms. Carry on, Vex Thor said coldly, and left. But he continued to watch. Every day, he reviewed the feeds, expecting to see the squad fall apart. Instead, he saw something else develop. By day 7, the squad moved differently. When Kira tired during a conditioning run, Yara simply picked up her equipment without being asked. When Dren started to panic during a simulation, Marcus talked him through it using the breathing techniques Matthews had taught them. They were not the strongest squad. They were not the fastest. But they moved as one unit in a way Vex Thor had never seen from recruits. On day 9, Matthews requested a meeting. Vex's Thor agreed, curious, despite himself. My squad is ready, Matthews said. Ready to fail, Vex Thor replied. I have watched your training methods. You have spent more time building friendships than building soldiers. I have built both, sir, Matthews said. May I show you something? He pulled up a datapad and displayed human military history files. These are the most successful military units in Earth's history. Special Forces teams. Elite units. They all have something in common. Vex Thor looked at the data. They trained together extensively. More than that, sir. They bonded. Many human special forces spend as much time on team cohesion as on combat training. They eat together, train together, face hardship together. By the time they deploy, they do not just trust each other. They love each other as brothers and sisters. Love is a weakness, Vex Thor said automatically. Is it? Matthews asked. Then why do soldiers in these units perform better under stress? Why do they have lower desertion rates, higher mission success rates, and better psychological outcomes after combat? He pulled up more data. Look at this. Human units with high cohesion scores survive longer, adapt faster, and accomplish more difficult missions than units of individually superior soldiers who do not bond. Vex Thor studied the information. The data was compelling, but it contradicted everything he believed. This is human psychology, he said. Other species do not work this way. Are you certain? Matthews asked. Because I have watched your graduates, sir. I accessed the alumni records with permission from your staff. Your graduates are incredibly capable individuals, but they do not form lasting connections. They serve their terms and leave. They do not recommend the academy to others. Many seek therapy for isolation issues. The words cut deep because they were true. Vex's Thor had seen the reports but had always dismissed them as individual weakness. What are you suggesting? He asked. I am suggesting that you have built a system that creates lonely warriors, Matthews said gently. You train them to be independent because you fear that connection makes them weak. But humans learned something important over thousands of years of war. Loneliness is a greater threat to a soldier than the enemy is. I survived the borderlands because I was alone, Vex Thor said quietly. No, sir, Matthews replied. You survived because you were not there when the ambush happened. But you did not truly survive. You have spent 20 years isolating yourself, punishing yourself, building walls between yourself and everyone around you. That is not survival. That is slow death. The words struck something deep inside Vex's Thor. For a moment, he could not speak. He saw himself clearly for the first time in 2 decades. A commander with no friends, an instructor who kept everyone at distance, a survivor who had stopped living. You think you understand me, Vex Thor said, his voice rough. I think you are in pain, sir, Matthews said. And I think you have built this academy as a monument to that pain. You are trying to make sure no one else suffers what you suffered, but you are doing it by making everyone suffer differently. Vex Thor stood abruptly and walked to the window. Outside, recruits trained in the afternoon heat. Some worked alone, pushing themselves to exhaustion. Others worked in pairs or small groups, supporting each other. Even if you are right about humans, Vex Thor said, the siege trial will reveal the truth. Your squad is weak. No amount of friendship will let Kira carry the required equipment load. No amount of trust will cure Dren's panic attacks. You are right, Matthews agreed. Friendship alone will not be enough. But friendship, combined with strategy, with each person contributing their unique strength while others cover their weaknesses, that creates something more powerful than any individual. We will see, Vex Thor said. The siege begins tomorrow at dawn. If your squad fails, you will leave this academy and never return. Understood, sir, Matthews said. But if we succeed, I want something more than just reconsidering training methods. Vex Thor turned to face him. What? I want you to consider that maybe you are not honoring your fallen unit by isolating yourself, Matthews said. Maybe the best way to honor them is to make sure future soldiers have what they did not have, not just training and discipline, but bonds strong enough to carry them through the worst moments. Vex Thor said nothing. Matthews saluted and left. That night, Vex Thor could not sleep. He stood on his balcony overlooking the training grounds, thinking about his unit. Their faces came back to him clearly, for the first time in years. Not the moment of their deaths, but the moments before. The way they joked during long patrols. The way they shared rations when supplies ran low. The way they trusted each other. They had been a team, a real team. And they had died, yes. But not because they cared, Ab. The siege of Broken Spire began at dawn. 18 squads assembled at the base of the ancient fortress ruins that served as the trial ground. The structure rose from the volcanic rock like a broken tooth, its walls equipped with automated defense systems and populated by senior instructors acting as enemy forces. The rules were simple. Each squad had 48 hours to capture and hold the central command point inside the fortress. They would face multiple layers of defense, active resistance from instructors, and environmental hazards. Most squads would fail. A few would succeed but take heavy casualties. Historically, only 1 or 2 squads completed the siege without losing members to injury or elimination. Vexthor watched from his command center as the squads spread out, each taking different approaches to the assault. Most chose direct strategies, using their strongest members to breach outer defenses, while others provided covering fire. Matthews's squad did something completely different. They did not move toward the fortress at all. "What are they doing?" Sorrel asked, watching the feeds with confusion. Vexthor zoomed in on Matthews's position. The squad had moved to a concealed location overlooking the fortress from distance. They were not preparing weapons or planning assault routes. They were observing. "They are wasting time," another instructor commented. "The fastest squads are already engaging the outer defenses." But Vexthor said nothing. He watched as Kira, the small Thelian, studied the fortress through enhanced optics, making notes on a datapad. The others sat quietly around her, occasionally pointing out details but mostly just waiting. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Other squads were deep into the assault now. One had already broken through the outer wall. Matthews's squad remained in their observation position. "They have given up," Sorrel said. "They know they cannot succeed." "No," Vexthor said quietly. "They are planning." At hour 3, Matthews gathered his squad and they reviewed Kira's notes. Vexthor activated the audio feed. "The defense pattern cycles every 43 minutes, Kira was saying, her voice confident. "The western approach has a blind spot for 16 seconds during the transition between automated turrets. The main gate looks heavily defended, but it is actually a trap. They want squads to waste resources there." "What about the command center?" Matthews asked. 3 possible routes," Kira replied. "But only one is viable for us. The ventilation system runs through the eastern wall. It is designed to be too narrow for most species, but I can fit through it easily." "That puts you at risk," Yara said, concern evident in her voice. "Only if I go alone," Kira replied. "But I will not be alone. You will all be in position, creating diversions and covering my approach." Matthews smiled. "Show us the plan." For the next hour, they rehearsed. Not the standard military drilling Vexthor was accustomed to, but something more fluid. Kira explained each person's role based on their unique abilities. Yara would use her strength to create a loud diversion at the northern wall. Dren would use his species' natural ability to climb sheer surfaces to position himself as a sniper. Marcus would coordinate communications. Pip would plant false heat signatures to confuse sensors. It was unconventional. It was strange. But as Vexthor watched, he realized it was also brilliant. At hour 6, Matthews's squad finally moved. While other squads were exhausted from hours of fighting, Matthews's team was fresh and focused. They moved with precision, each member knowing exactly what they needed to do. Yara reached the northern wall and began her diversion. She used explosive charges to create noise and light, drawing the attention of automated defenses and instructor forces. It looked like a frontal assault, and defensive resources shifted to respond. While attention focused north, Kira moved quietly along the eastern wall. She was so small that motion sensors barely registered her presence. She reached the ventilation access point and slipped inside, disappearing from external cameras. Vexthor switched to internal fortress feeds. He watched the tiny Thelian navigate through narrow passages that would have been impossible for larger species. She moved with confidence, following the mental map she had created during her observation period. "She is alone in there," Sorrel said. "If she encounters resistance, she has no backup." But Vexthor noticed something. Kira wore a communication piece, and Matthews maintained constant contact with her. 20 meters ahead, slight right turn, Matthews said calmly. 2 instructors are patrolling that corridor, but they will pass in 15 seconds. Kira waited, hidden in the ventilation shaft. The instructors passed below her, unaware. She continued forward. The coordination was remarkable. Marcus monitored all communication frequencies, alerting the team to enemy movements. Pip's false signatures kept defenders confused about actual positions. Dren provided overwatch, taking out sensors and cameras with precise shots, and Matthews held it all together, his voice steady and encouraging over the comm. "Dren, you are doing great," Matthews said. "Yara, perfect diversion. Kira, you are almost to the command center. 30 meters. Then something went wrong. Kira triggered a pressure sensor that the team had not identified. Alarms blared through the fortress. Automated defenses activated throughout the interior. The tiny Thelian froze in the ventilation shaft, her breathing rapid over the comm. "I cannot move," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "They will find me." "Kira, listen to me," Matthews said immediately. "You are okay. You are safe in the shaft. The sensors cannot track you precisely in there. But the alarm," Kira said, "is going to bring defenders to the command center." Matthews agreed. "Which means we adjust the plan. Yara, increase your diversion. Make them think the main assault is from your position. Dren, can you take out the alarm system?" "I see it," Dren replied. Then his voice changed, becoming tight. "But there are 3 instructors in my sight line. I cannot breathe." Vex Thor leaned forward. Dren was having a panic attack, exactly as his file predicted. In any normal squad, this would lead to mission failure. A frozen sniper was useless. But Marcus's voice came over the comm, calm and steady. "Dren, brother, I am right here with you. Remember the breathing. 4 counts in." A pause. Vex Thor could hear Dren's ragged breathing over the comm. 4 counts hold," Marcus continued. Another pause. The breathing slowed slightly. 4 counts out. Dren's breathing steadied. "I am okay. I am okay." Taking the shot. "Ulber K." 3 quick shots. The alarm went silent. "Perfect," Matthews said. "Kira, you have a clear path now. 15 meters to the command center door." Kira moved forward. Vex Thor watched her reach the command center entrance. It was locked with a code that changed randomly. Standard procedure would require breaching charges or extensive hacking. Kira pulled out a small device and attached it to the lock. "Pip, can you run the decrypt program?" "Already on it," Pip replied. "Give me 30 seconds." While they worked, Yara's diversion reached its peak. The Krynoc warrior was single-handedly keeping half the fortress's defenders occupied. She took hits from training rounds, her armor absorbing the impacts, but she kept fighting. "Code broken," Pip announced. "Kira, you are clear." The door opened. Kira slipped inside the command center. The objective was simple. Access the main terminal and input the completion code. But the room was not empty. An instructor stood guard, a massive Krynoc male, twice Kira's size. In a physical confrontation, she had no chance. "Contact in the command center," Kira reported, her voice tight. "Can you avoid him?" Matthews asked. "No. He is between me and the terminal." Vex Thor waited for Matthews to order a retreat or send backup. But the human did something unexpected. "Kira, do you remember what we talked about?" Matthews asked. "About your strengths?" "I am not a fighter," Kira replied. "No, you are a thinker. You are smarter than him. Use that." A pause. Then Kira's voice came back, steadier. "I have an idea." Vex Thor watched as the small Thelian deliberately made noise, drawing the instructor's attention. The Krynoc turned toward her, raising his training weapon. Kira ran. Not toward the terminal, but toward a control panel on the wall. The instructor followed, convinced this was an easy capture. But Kira's small size let her slip under equipment that blocked the larger warrior. She reached the control panel and activated the fortress's fire suppression system. Foam flooded the room. The instructor shouted in surprise, temporarily blinded. Kira used those precious seconds to reach the terminal and input the code. "Objective complete," she said, breathing hard. "We did it." The fortress alarm changed tone, signaling successful capture. Matthews's squad had completed the siege. Vexthor sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. They had done it. Not through superior strength or traditional tactics, but through coordination, creativity, and trust. Each member had contributed their unique ability. Each weakness had been covered by someone else's strength. And most importantly, when Dren had frozen, when panic should have ended the mission, his teammate had been there. Not to punish or replace him, but to support him until he could function again. "Impossible," Sorrel whispered. They should not have succeeded. But Vexthor understood now. They succeeded precisely because they were not the strongest or fastest or most aggressive. They succeeded because they were a team in the truest sense. They trusted each other completely. The other squads completed or failed over the next hours, but Vexthor barely noticed. His mind kept returning to what he had witnessed. 20 years of methodology challenged by 6 recruits who should have been failures. When the trial officially ended, Vexthor summoned Matthews to his office. The human arrived, still wearing dusty combat gear. Exhaustion evident in his face, but satisfaction in his eyes. "Your squad succeeded," Vexthor said without preamble. "Yes, sir," Matthews replied. "They should not have. By every metric this academy uses, they were the least capable squad in the trial." "They were the most underestimated squad, sir," Matthews corrected gently. "There is a difference." Vexthor stood and walked to his window. He looked out at the training grounds where his recruits prepared for future trials. How many had he underestimated? How many had he broken who could have been built up instead? "I watched Dren have a panic attack during your mission," Vexthor said quietly. "In my system, that would have ended his military career. But Marcus helped him through it, and Dren completed a shot that was critical to your success." "Yes, sir." "That should not work," Vexthor said. "Soldiers must be able to function independently. What if Marcus had not been there?" "Then someone else would have been," Matthews said. "That is the point, sir. In a real team, you are never truly alone. And knowing that, truly believing it, gives soldiers strength they would never have in isolation." Vexthor turned to face him. "You were right. About everything. About my methods. About my pain. About what I have been doing to these recruits." The assembly hall filled with confused murmurs, as all 300 recruits gathered the morning after the siege trial. Word had spread about Matthews's squad completing the trial despite being ranked last in capability. Some recruits saw it as inspiration. Others dismissed it as luck. Vexthor stood on the platform, looking out at the crowd. For 20 years, he had stood here dispensing harsh truths and harsher discipline. Today would be different. "Recruits," he began, his voice cutting through the noise. "Yesterday, you witnessed something that should have been impossible by this academy's standards. The lowest-ranked squad completed the most difficult trial we have. Some of you believe this was chance. It was not." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "For 20 years, I have trained you to be alone. I have taught you that depending on others is weakness. That emotional connection is a liability. That only individual strength matters. I was wrong." The murmurs grew louder. Vexthor heard shock, disbelief, even anger in the voices. Commandants did not admit mistakes. They certainly did not do so publicly. "I built this academy on a foundation of pain," he continued. "I lost soldiers I cared about. And I decided the solution was to never care again. To train all of you to be isolated, self-sufficient, incapable of the bonds that I believed got my unit killed. But those bonds did not kill my unit. My failure to gather proper intelligence killed them. My failure as a commander killed them." He saw some recruits shifting uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, listening intently. "Starting today, this academy changes. We will still push you to your limits. We will still demand excellence. But we will also teach you something I failed to learn until now. Real strength is not just individual capability. It is the ability to work as part of something greater than yourself, to trust your team and be worthy of their trust, to be both capable alone and stronger together. The hall erupted in noise. Some recruits cheered. Others protested. Several senior instructors stood from their positions along the walls, faces showing clear disagreement. Instructor Korvan, a Kaldrith veteran who had served under Vexthor for 15 years, stepped forward. Commandant, this is a mistake. You are weakening the program. The Forge produces elite soldiers because we eliminate weakness, not accommodate it. Vexthor met his gaze steadily. We eliminate potential, Korvan. We break recruits who could have become excellent soldiers if we had taken the time to understand their strengths. We graduate hard, isolated warriors who serve their minimum terms and leave. That is not success. That is waste. You are letting one human with no military experience overturn decades of proven methodology, Korvan argued. This is sentiment, not strategy. Then let us test it, Vexthor said. Continue training your assigned squads using traditional methods. I will personally oversee restructuring other squads using new approaches. In 3 months, we compare results, mission success rates, team cohesion scores, individual performance metrics. If traditional methods prove superior, we return to them. If the new methods work better, we implement them academy-wide. Korvan looked like he wanted to argue further, but he nodded curtly. Agreed. Over the following days, the academy split into 2 distinct philosophies. Half the instructors embraced change, eager to try new approaches. The other half resisted, convinced Vexthor had gone soft. Vexthor worked directly with Matthews to redesign training protocols. Physical conditioning remained rigorous, but now included team-based challenges. Combat drills still pushed individual skill, but incorporated squad coordination. Most significantly, they introduced psychological support services and regular team-building sessions. The resistance was immediate and vocal. Recruits from species that prized individual achievement, particularly the Krynok and Kaldrith, initially rejected the new methods as beneath them. Several demanded transfers to traditionally trained squads. Let them go, Matthews advised when Vexthor expressed concern. Some species, some individuals, will never adapt. The first major test came during a live-fire exercise, 3 weeks into the new program. A squad trained under traditional methods faced off against one of Matthews's cooperatively trained teams in a capture scenario. Vexthor watched from the observation deck, Korvan standing beside him. The traditional squad had superior individual scores, better equipment handling, faster times on all standard assessments. They should have won easily, but the cooperative squad worked with a fluidity the traditional team could not match. When one member was pinned down by simulated fire, 2 others immediately coordinated a rescue without waiting for orders. When their planned route was blocked, they adapted instantly, each member knowing their role without needing to be told. The traditional squad fought well as individuals. The cooperative squad fought brilliantly as a unit. The cooperative team won decisively. Korvan watched in silence for a long moment. How? He finally asked. Because they trust each other completely, Vexthor replied. Trust eliminates hesitation. It allows for instant adaptation because each member knows the others will support their decisions. Over the next weeks, more instructors requested training in the new methods. More recruits asked to transfer to cooperative squads. The transformation was not instant or universal, but it was undeniable. Vexthor also began his own personal transformation. He reached out to former graduates, many of whom he had not spoken to in years. The conversations were difficult. Many expressed anger about how the academy had damaged them psychologically. Others shared stories of isolation and difficulty bonding with their military units after graduation. One former graduate, a Silith named Thresh, who had graduated 5 years earlier, said something that struck Vex Thor deeply during a video call. "Commandant, you taught me to be the best individual warrior I could be," Thresh said. "But you also taught me that needing others was weakness. So when I struggled with combat trauma after my first deployment, I told no one. I suffered alone for 2 years, before finally seeking help. I nearly ended my life because I believed asking for support meant I had failed." The words haunted Vex's Thor. He began attending therapy sessions himself, working through the survivor's guilt he had carried for 2 decades. It was harder than any combat, more painful than any physical wound. But slowly, he began to heal. Matthews noticed the change. "You seem different, sir," he said during one of their planning sessions. "I am allowing myself to feel again," Vex Thor replied. "It is uncomfortable, but also necessary." "That takes courage," Matthews said. "No, isolating myself was cowardice," Vex Thor corrected. "This is simply honesty." 4 months after the transformation began, the Coalition Military Command arrived for their standard annual assessment. They evaluated both traditionally trained and cooperatively trained squads across multiple scenarios. Vex Thor stood in his office awaiting the results, more nervous than he had been in years. If the new methods failed, he would have damaged his academy's reputation and his own career. Worse, he would have failed the recruits who had embraced the changes. The assessment officer, a stern Caldrith general named Vex Rim, entered the office and placed a datapad on the desk. "Commandant Vex Thor," she began formally. "I have completed the evaluation of your academy." "And?" Vex Thor asked. "The results are unprecedented," Vex Rim said. "The cooperatively trained squads outperformed traditionally trained squads in 78% of scenarios. More significantly, they showed dramatically superior stress management, mission adaptability, and unit cohesion scores." She looked up from the datapad. "What did you do differently?" Vex Thor told her everything. About Matthews and his challenge. About the siege trial. About realizing that isolation was not strength. Vex Rim listened without interruption. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "The Coalition has been concerned about soldier retention and mental health issues for years," she finally said. "We have lost good warriors to psychological trauma, suicide, and burnout. If your methods can address this while maintaining combat effectiveness, the entire Coalition military needs to learn them." "One human recruit showed me what we were missing," Vex Thor said. "Perhaps humans understand something about warfare that we had forgotten. That soldiers fight best, not just for causes or duty, but for each other." 6 months after the transformation began, the first class trained entirely under the new system prepared to graduate. The ceremony was different from previous years. Instead of 9 graduates standing alone on the platform, over 60 recruits stood together in squads. The graduation rate had increased from 3% to 20%. More importantly, follow-up surveys showed 92% intended to re-enlist after their first term, compared to the historical 18%. Matthews stood among the graduates, preparing for his first assignment. Vex Thor called him aside before the ceremony began. "You changed everything," Vex Thor said simply. "One human with no military experience restructured the Coalition's premier military academy. I just showed you what humans learned over thousands of years of fighting each other," Matthews replied. "That war is hell. But warriors do not have to face that hell alone." Quote, "Where will you be assigned?" Vex Thor asked. "The Coalition 3rd Fleet. They are forming new mixed species units and want soldiers trained in cooperative methods. They will be lucky to have you." Matthews smiled. "Thank you, sir. But this was never about me. It was about giving all these recruits something you and I both know soldiers need. A reason to keep fighting when everything looks hopeless. Someone to fight for. Someone to fight beside. Someone to come home to." "I spent 20 years teaching the opposite," Vex Thor said. "How do I make up for that?" "You already are," Matthews replied. "Every recruit you train from now on will learn what I had to teach you. That vulnerability is not weakness. That asking for help is courage. That the strongest warriors are the ones brave enough to care." The graduation ceremony proceeded with new traditions. Squads accepted their completion certificates together rather than individually. Recruits who struggled were honored alongside high performers, recognized not for being the best, but for supporting their teams. Vexthor stood watching, and for the first time in 20 years, he felt something other than grim satisfaction at producing isolated warriors. He felt hope. After the ceremony, as graduates prepared to leave for their assignments, Vexthor found himself surrounded by recruits thanking him. Not the formal, fearful acknowledgments he was accustomed to, but genuine gratitude. Some even embraced him, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months earlier. That evening, Vexthor sat alone in his quarters, looking at a photo he had kept hidden for 2 decades. His old unit. All of them together. Smiling before that final mission. For years, this photo had brought only pain. Now, he allowed himself to remember them as they were. Friends, brothers and sisters in arms. People he had cared about deeply. Their deaths were still tragic, still painful. But Vexthor finally understood that honoring their memory did not mean isolating himself. It meant ensuring future soldiers had the bonds his unit had valued. He placed the photo on his desk where he could see it every day, not as a reminder of failure, but as inspiration to do better. The academy continued to evolve. News of the transformation spread throughout the coalition military. Other training facilities began adopting similar methods. Psychological support became standard, rather than stigmatized. Unit cohesion training became as important as combat drills. And at the center of it all, Vexthor led not through fear and intimidation, but through example and mentorship. He was still demanding, still pushed recruits to their limits, but now he also encouraged them, supported them, and most importantly, taught them to support each other. 1 year after Matthews broke him in 6 hours, Vexthor stood before a new batch of recruits, giving his opening speech. The words were different now. "You stand here today because you have potential," he began. "You are right to be nervous. This academy will push you harder than anything you have experienced. You will face challenges that seem impossible. You will discover weaknesses you did not know you had." He paused, scanning the crowd. "But you will not face these challenges alone. The recruits standing beside you right now, they are not your competition. They are your future teammate, your support, your reason to push beyond what you thought possible. You will learn to be individually capable, yes, but more importantly, you will learn to be part of something greater than yourself." He saw hope in their eyes, rather than just fear. "This is the forge," he continued. "We will still forge you into warriors, but we will no longer forge you alone. We will forge you into teams, into families, into soldiers who understand that true strength comes from trust, compassion, and the courage to be vulnerable with those who fight beside you." The speech ended. The recruits dispersed to their barracks, and Vexthor felt something he had not experienced in 2 decades. Peace. That evening, he sent a message to Matthews, now serving with distinction in the 3rd Fleet. "You asked me once if I was brave enough to change. The answer was no. Not until you showed me how. Thank you for breaking me. Thank you for showing me that being broken was not the end, but the beginning of becoming whole. The academy thrives. More importantly, I am learning to thrive as well. The galaxy is better because of what you taught us. Not that humans are superior, but that humanity, in its truest sense, is what makes soldiers into heroes." The response came quickly. "Commandant, you taught yourself. I just gave you permission to heal. Keep forging warriors, but remember to forge them with hearts as strong as their bodies. The galaxy needs both." W. Allone. Vexthor smiled and looked out at the training grounds. Recruits worked in pairs and groups, supporting each other through difficult exercises. Instructors offered encouragement alongside correction. The forge was still tough, still demanding, still produced elite soldiers. But now it also produced something more important. It produced warriors who knew they were never alone, who fought not just for duty or honor, but for the person beside them, who understood that the most powerful weapon in the universe was not any technology or tactic, but the unbreakable bond between soldiers who trusted each other completely. One human had changed everything in 6 hours. But the change would echo through the coalition military for generations, and Commandant Vex Thor, once the loneliest warrior in the galaxy, finally understood what it meant to truly come home. "Sir," Matthews began, but Vex Thor raised a hand. "Let me finish. For 20 years, I have been building soldiers who could survive what I survived, but I was building them wrong. I was teaching them to be alone, because I could not bear to lose another unit. But isolation is not protection. It is prison." He took a deep breath. "I want to change the academy. I want your help to do it. But I need to know, can this work on a larger scale? Can we train entire classes this way?" Matthews smiled. "Yes, sir. Human militaries have been doing it for centuries. It will not be easy. Some recruits will resist. Some instructors will fight the changes. But it will work." Vex Thor nodded slowly. "Then we begin tomorrow. But first, I need to do something I should have done 20 years ago." "What is that, sir?" "I need to apologize to every graduate I failed by teaching them to be alone, out each other. They died because Vex's Thor, as their commanding officer, had failed to gather adequate intelligence. He had sent them into danger without proper preparation. He had blamed their compassion because blaming himself was too painful. The realization felt like a physical weight lifting from his chest. For 20 years, he had carried guilt disguised as philosophy. He had punished thousands of recruits for a mistake that was his alone. As dawn approached, Vex Thor made a decision. He would watch the siege trial closely, not hoping for Matthews to fail, but genuinely curious to see if this human's philosophy could survive contact with reality. And if it did, Vex Thor would have to ask himself a difficult question. Was he brave enough to change? Matthews saluted and left the office. Vex Thor stood alone, staring at the door. He had just agreed to let a recruit, a human with no military experience, attempt to overturn everything the Forge represented. It was madness. But as he returned to his desk and pulled up the files of the Academy's worst recruits, he felt something he had not experienced in 2 decades. Curiosity. And beneath that, buried deep and almost unrecognizable, the smallest flicker of hope. "You dare," Vex Thor began. But Matthews interrupted him. "If I have failed, I have failed, sir," the human said calmly. "But Kess will live." Vex Thor stared at the human for a long moment. Every instinct told him to expel Matthews immediately, to make an example of this defiance. But something stopped him. Some small voice he had buried 20 years ago whispered that perhaps this human saw something Vex Thor had blinded himself to. "Medical team to these coordinates," Vex Thor ordered through his comm. "Retrieve the Venlith recruit. Matthews, return to base immediately. You are confined to quarters. Pending disciplinary review." "Yes, sir," Matthews said. He stood, nodded once to the barely conscious Kess, and began the long walk back. Vex's Thor watched him go, then returned to his transport. As he lifted back into the air, he could not shake the feeling that something had just changed. That, in 6 simple words, are we permitted to help each other? This human had started to unravel everything Vex Thor had built. And the most disturbing part was that Vex Thor did not immediately know how to stop it.